Only minutes after my father's funeral, I stood alone beside his freshly covered grave while the rest of my family drifted toward their cars. Their conversations faded into the distance, but I couldn't force myself to leave. It felt as though walking away meant saying goodbye forever. As I wiped my tears, our longtime housekeeper approached with trembling hands and frightened eyes. "Your father made me promise I would tell you this only after he was gone," she whispered. "Whatever happens next, don't trust anyone in your family." Hi everyone, I have only 20 subscribers so far. My next goal is to reach 50 subscribers. If you enjoy my stories, please subscribe to my channel. Your one subscription means a lot to me. Thank you. Especially your older brother. Before I could respond, she slipped an old brass key into my palm. "It opened something hidden in your father's study. He prayed you would find it." A voice suddenly called her name from behind us. She stepped away without another word, leaving me frozen. As I stared at the worn key, one question echoed through my mind. What secret had my father taken to his grave? My father was never the kind of man who measured success by the size of a bank account. He believed a person's character was worth more than any fortune, and he spent his life proving it, through quiet actions instead of impressive speeches. Growing up, I watched him treat every employee with respect and every promise as something sacred. Those values shaped the person I became. We rarely needed many words to understand each other because trust had always filled the silence between us. My older brother saw the world differently. He admired expensive cars, luxury investments, and fast profits. He often insisted that the family estate was wasted on memories when it could become a source of enormous wealth. For years, he urged our father to sell the property and finance one ambitious business venture after another. My father listened patiently but refused every proposal. He would simply smile and say that some things were too valuable to put a price on. At the time, I believed those disagreements were nothing more than ordinary family conflicts. Every family has different opinions, and ours seemed no different. Yet after Father's death, memories I had ignored began returning with unsettling clarity. I remembered hearing muffled arguments late at night, behind the closed door of his study. I remembered seeing important folders disappear from his desk without explanation. Most of all, I remembered how he had suddenly started locking that study, something he had never done before. Whenever I asked about it, he would reassure me with the same calm smile and tell me everything was under control. I wanted to believe him because trusting him had always been easy. Now, with the brass key resting heavily in my pocket, those forgotten moments no longer felt ordinary. They felt like pieces of a puzzle my father had quietly been preparing me to solve, and I feared the truth waiting inside that locked study would change everything I believed about my own family. After the funeral, we returned to the estate in complete silence. The house that had always felt warm suddenly seemed unfamiliar. Before anyone had even taken off their coats, my older brother announced that we needed to sort through Father's belongings immediately. He insisted there was no reason to delay practical matters. His urgency unsettled me. Grief usually slows people down, but he behaved as though he were racing against an invisible clock. He directed relatives from room to room, deciding what should be packed, donated, or discarded. Whenever I suggested waiting a few days, he brushed my concerns aside with forced politeness. The more he smiled, the less genuine he seemed. I caught him glancing toward Father's study several times, only to quickly look away whenever I noticed. The housekeeper remained unusually quiet. She moved through the rooms with lowered eyes, answering questions with short replies. When our paths crossed in the hallway, she looked at the brass key hidden inside my pocket, then quickly turned away before anyone could notice. Fear had settled across her face like a shadow, and I realized she was carrying a burden she desperately wanted to hide. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I slipped quietly through the dark hallway. The old key fit perfectly into the study door. The lock clicked open with surprising ease. Dust floated through the moonlight. As I stepped inside the room Father had guarded so carefully during his final months. Inside an antique cabinet hidden behind neatly stacked books, I discovered a sealed wooden box. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. There were handwritten journals, carefully organized financial records, several personal letters, and a small flash drive. A handwritten label caught my attention. "If you're reading this, it's because I'm gone." My heartbeat echoed through the silent room. I reached for the flash drive, desperate to understand what Father had wanted me to know. Before I could examine another page, slow footsteps creaked outside the study door. Someone had awakened, and whoever it was had stopped directly outside. The footsteps paused outside the study, then slowly faded down the hallway. I waited until the silence returned before gathering everything. From the wooden box and hiding it safely in my room, sleep never came that night. As dawn broke, I began reading Father's journals and sorting through the documents. Page after page revealed a truth I could barely accept. My brother had quietly manipulated Father's business affairs for years. There were altered contracts, suspicious bank transfers, forged signatures, and detailed notes Father had written after discovering irregularities. He had documented everything with remarkable patience, as though he knew one day someone would need proof instead of promises. That afternoon, our family gathered in the estate's dining room to discuss Father's property and the future of the company. Before anyone else could speak, my brother stood confidently and announced that Father's affairs needed firm leadership. Then, without warning, he looked directly at me. "I hate saying this," he declared, "but I've discovered that my brother has been trying to interfere with Father's finances. We need to protect what's left before more damage is done." The room fell silent. Relatives exchanged uneasy glances before turning toward me. One by one, questions became accusations. Some believed him immediately because he spoke with certainty. Others simply remained quiet, unwilling to challenge the loudest voice in the room. I tried to defend myself, but every explanation sounded weaker against the story he had carefully prepared. The humiliation settled heavily on my shoulders. These were people who had watched me grow up, yet doubt appeared in their eyes within minutes. My brother remained calm, almost satisfied, as though he had rehearsed this moment countless times. Only the housekeeper refused to look away. As she quietly poured another cup of tea beside me, she gently rested her hand against my arm for a brief moment. She said nothing, yet her silent reassurance reminded me that truth did not disappear simply because lies were spoken. Confidently, my brother believed he had destroyed my reputation. Before anyone could question his version of events, he smiled as the meeting ended, convinced victory already belonged to him. He never imagined that hidden inside Father's journals was evidence capable of exposing every deception he had spent years carefully constructing. Every instinct urged me to confront my brother immediately, but Father's journals reminded me that truth becomes strongest when supported by undeniable evidence. I locked the wooden box away and contacted the only person Father had trusted outside our family, his longtime attorney. After listening quietly to everything I had discovered, he agreed we should verify every detail before making a single accusation. For several days, we examined each journal entry, contract, and financial statement with careful patience. Father's handwritten notes matched dates on bank records, company files, and legal documents. Transactions that had once seemed ordinary revealed a pattern of deception, stretching back years. Every verified page strengthened the case my father had quietly built before his death. Then we opened the flash drive. Inside were recorded conversations between Father and my brother. My brother repeatedly pressured him to sign revised agreements while pretending they were routine paperwork. Father questioned unusual transfers and missing funds, yet my brother always offered convincing explanations. Listening to those recordings was heartbreaking. I could hear the disappointment growing in Father's voice long before he stopped trusting his own son. The attorney uncovered additional banking records through the company's accountants. Together, the documents confirmed unauthorized transfers and forged approvals that could not be dismissed as simple mistakes. Everything Father had suspected was true. Meanwhile, my brother behaved as though the future already belonged to him. He spoke confidently about expanding the business, entertained relatives with ambitious plans, and accepted their admiration without hesitation. Watching him celebrate was difficult, but I refused to interrupt his confidence. The higher his certainty climbed, the harder his fall would be. I said very little, choosing patience over anger. My silence convinced him I had accepted defeat, when in reality every passing day brought us closer to the moment Father had prepared for. Soon, the evidence would speak far more clearly than either of us ever could. The day of the inheritance reading arrived with a strange sense of calm. My brother entered the attorney's office, wearing the confidence of a man who believed victory was already secured. Several relatives greeted him warmly, still convinced by the story he had carefully built. I took my seat without argument and waited. Once everyone had gathered, Father's attorney opened a sealed folder and announced, that before any assets were discussed, Father had left a final recorded message for the family. The room grew quiet as the screen illuminated. My father's face appeared. Though seeing him again tightened my chest, his voice remained steady and familiar. "If you are watching this," he began, "then I am no longer here to protect this family myself. For months before my death, I discovered evidence that someone I loved was betraying both me and the values this family was built upon." The atmosphere changed immediately. Father explained how he had noticed unusual transactions, missing records, and altered documents. Rather than confronting the situation emotionally, he chose to investigate carefully. He documented every discovery, preserved every conversation, and worked closely with trusted professionals to verify the facts. When the recording ended, the attorney began presenting the evidence. One document revealed forged signatures, another exposed unauthorized transfers. Bank records confirmed suspicious movements of company funds. Journal entries matched the dates precisely. Then came the audio recordings. My brother's voice filled the room as everyone listened to him pressure Father into signing papers while concealing their true purpose. The confidence disappeared from his face. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. Relatives who had once supported him sat in stunned silence. Some lowered their eyes, others stared at him with disbelief. Nobody interrupted because the evidence spoke more clearly than any accusation ever could. Finally, the attorney opened Father's last will. Father's instructions were unmistakable. Because of his dishonesty, manipulation, and breach of trust, my brother would receive no control over the estate, the company, or the family home. Those responsibilities were entrusted entirely to me. The room remained silent after the announcement. There was no celebration, no shouting, no revenge, only truth. My brother attempted to defend himself, but his words carried no weight against years of documented evidence. The story he had constructed collapsed piece by piece until nothing remained. As everyone slowly absorbed what had happened, I realized Father had given me far more than an inheritance. He had given me something stronger than anger and more lasting than revenge. He had given me justice. Months passed and life slowly found its balance again. The estate no longer felt weighed down by secrets. The company regained its stability. The employees kept their jobs. And every decision I made reflected the values my father had spent a lifetime protecting. Our housekeeper remained with us, not as an employee alone, but as someone our family would always honor for keeping her promise when it mattered most. I rarely heard news about my brother. His choices had become his own punishment. The respect he once demanded could not survive the truth he had tried so hard to bury. I no longer carried anger toward him because resentment would only imprison me beside his mistakes. One quiet evening, I stood alone in Father's garden, where he had often found peace after difficult days. The flowers had begun to bloom again, and the familiar silence no longer felt empty. It felt comforting. That was when I finally understood what my father had wanted me to inherit. It was never simply the estate, the company, or the family home. His greatest gift was the wisdom to remain patient when others chose deception, and the courage to let truth speak louder than revenge. As I looked across the garden, I smiled for the first time in months, knowing his legacy would continue through every honest decision I made. The truth may walk slowly, but when it finally arrives, no lie is strong enough to stand in its way.